After World War II, America entered an era of optimism unlike anything it had ever seen. Detroit factories glowed under bright lights, and assembly lines began producing chrome-plated steel machines that shimmered like dreams on four wheels. Gas was cheap, American wallets were full, and car designers believed the future was opening right in front of them, with towering tail fins, bodies stretched long like runways, and dashboards that looked like the cockpit of a spaceship. But when that confidence turned into a blank check for imagination, the line between bold and ridiculous began to blur. Engineers experimented with strange ideas, complex mechanical systems, and sometimes, decisions that made drivers simply shake their heads. In this video, we're going to reopen a lesser-told chapter of Detroit's history, 12 of the strangest cars the 1950s ever produced. Among them was a car that placed the gear shift buttons right in the center of the steering wheel, and another that was sold with a pink umbrella and a matching makeup kit. And believe me, that's only the beginning. 1958 Ford Edsel. In the mid-1950s, Ford believed it was preparing to launch the car that would define the future of the American automobile industry. The company spent an enormous amount of money on a nationwide advertising campaign, from television and radio to massive billboards. Expectations were pushed so high that Edsel's launch day felt almost like a national event rather than just a car unveiling. But when the car finally appeared in showrooms, the public reaction almost immediately shifted to confusion. The biggest reason was the design of the front end, with a vertical oval grille that many people at the time described as looking like a horse collar. Instead of appearing modern and bold, the front of the car felt awkward and difficult for American buyers of the era to accept. However, the controversial design was still not the most absurd part. Ford also equipped the Edsel with the Teletouch shifting system, a row of push buttons placed right in the center of the steering wheel. The idea sounded very futuristic, almost like the control panel of a jet aircraft. But in reality, in emergency situations, many drivers accidentally pressed the reverse or park button instead of the horn, a mistake that could destroy the transmission almost instantly. Ironically, hidden beneath that controversial exterior was an extremely powerful engine. The Edsel was equipped with the E47 5MELV8 engine with a displacement of 410 cubic inches, producing around 345 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. Very impressive numbers for the late 1950s. But that power was not enough to save the car's reputation. Within 3 years, Ford sold only about 118,000 Edsels before being forced to cancel the project. The total loss was estimated at $350 million, equivalent to billions of dollars today. 1954 Kaiser Darrin. In the early 1950s, as the sports car craze began spreading across America thanks to the arrival of the Chevrolet Corvette, Kaiser also wanted a model of its own to enter the competition. Designer Howard "Dutch" Darrin was tasked with creating a compact roadster that would be bold and completely different from the bulky sedans of that era. And he truly did create a car. Different in a way no one expected. The most eye-catching feature of the Kaiser Darrin was its pocket doors, sliding door design. Instead of opening outward like normal car doors, the two doors of the Darrin slid straight into the front fender wells. On paper, the idea looked futuristic and clean. But in reality, problems appeared quickly. If dust or small pebbles got into the sliding mechanism, the doors could jam completely, making it extremely frustrating to get in or out of the car. The front of the car was no less controversial. The small grille sat low, with a curved shape that many people said looked like a pair of puckered lips. However, what truly made the Kaiser Darrin difficult to compete lay under the hood. While the Corvette was beginning to build its reputation with increasing power, the Darrin used a Willys Hurricane F-head inline-6 engine with a displacement of 161 cubic inches, producing only about 90 horsepower and 135 pound-feet of torque. For a car marketed as a sports roadster, those numbers were clearly too modest. As a result, the market almost completely turned its back on it. Only 435 Kaiser Darrins were produced before the project quickly came to an end. Not long after that, Kaiser also withdrew entirely from the passenger car market in the United States. 1955 Dodge La Femme. In the 1950s, American automakers began to realize that women were increasingly involved in choosing and using family cars. Dodge decided to seize that opportunity by creating a model designed specifically for women. The idea sounded progressive, but the way it was executed carried many of the stereotypes of the era. La Femme was painted in a soft pink and white color combination with interior upholstery featuring rose-patterned fabric. Every detail, from the dashboard to the door panels, was color-coordinated in a gentle, decorative style, looking more like a vanity room than the cabin of an automobile. But what truly made this car unusual was the set of accessories that came with it. Each Dodge La Femme came with a special gift set: a pink raincoat, a pink umbrella, a compact powder makeup kit, and a handbag designed to fit perfectly into a dedicated compartment behind the passenger seat. From a technical standpoint, the La Femme was not weak at all. It used a red Ram Hemi Fiv 8 engine with a displacement of 270 cubic inches, producing about 183 horsepower and 245 pound-feet of torque, more than enough to perform like any other Dodge of the same era. However, the market response was rather lukewarm. Many women felt that this car looked more like a toy designed around outdated stereotypes than a vehicle truly built for them. During 2 years of production, Dodge sold only about 2,500 La Femme cars before quietly removing the model from showrooms. 1950 Nash Airflyte. Bathtub. After World War II, many American automakers began paying attention to aerodynamics, a concept that was still fairly new at the time. Nash wanted to lead this trend by creating a smooth, streamlined body where no element disrupted the flow of air. The result was the Airflyte design, with an extremely rounded, bulging, and unified shape. All 4 wheels were partially enclosed within the body, making the car look like a giant bathtub rolling down the road. Because of this, the name bathtub quickly became the nickname associated with this model. In theory, the design helped reduce aerodynamic drag and provided a smoother driving experience. But in reality, it also created a very frustrating problem. Because the front wheels were partially covered by the body, the steering angle was significantly limited. This gave the Nash an astonishingly wide turning radius. Parallel parking on city streets, already difficult with large American sedans, became a genuine challenge. Mechanics were not particularly fond of this design either. Even something as simple as changing a tire or repairing the brakes became far more complicated than on cars with normally exposed wheels. Under the hood, the Nash Airflyte used a Superflying Scott inline-6 engine with a displacement of 234.8 cubic inches, producing about 112 horsepower and 208 pound-feet of torque, enough to deliver a fairly smooth and stable driving experience on the open road. Interestingly, despite the jokes about its appearance, the car actually sold quite well. Nash sold more than 100,000 units, largely thanks to its spacious cabin and smooth ride quality. However, the enclosed front-wheel design was ultimately considered too inconvenient. Just a few years later, Nash quietly abandoned the idea, and the era of the bathtub sedans quickly came to an end. 1958 Packard Hawk. For many decades, Packard was a symbol of American luxury. The company's limousines once carried presidents, business magnates, and some of the most powerful figures in the country. But by the late 1950s, the company had fallen into serious financial trouble and was forced to merge with Studebaker in order to survive. In that desperate situation, Packard attempted to release a luxury sports car to revive the brand's image. The result was the Packard Hawk. But instead of developing an entirely new car, the company chose a faster and cheaper route, using the body of the Studebaker Golden Hawk, then attaching a completely new fiberglass front end. And it was precisely that front end that made everything become rather awkward. The grille was wide, rounded, and gaping, leading many people to compare it to the mouth of a giant catfish. This design completely destroyed the elegance that had been associated with the Packard name for decades. Ironically, beneath that strange exterior was a rather impressive powertrain. The Packard Hawk used a Studebaker Sweepstakes Fiv 8 engine with a displacement of 289 cubic inches, equipped with a McCulloch supercharger. This engine produced about 275 horsepower and 333 pound-feet of torque, delivering strong acceleration compared to many coupes of the same era. But mechanical strength could not save the car's image. The public saw a patched-together product that no longer resembled a brand once considered the peak of refinement. As a result, only 588 Packard Hawks were produced. Not long after that, the Packard name nearly disappeared from the American car market. 1957 Mercury Turnpike Cruiser. At that time, American automakers were racing to turn cars into machines of the future. Ideas inspired by the space age were appearing everywhere, from dashboards that looked like aircraft cockpits to design elements resembling spacecraft. The Turnpike cruiser was the result of engineers deciding to pack nearly every possible idea into a single car. The front end stood out with two large air scoops mounted on top of the windshield, looking like giant antennas from a spaceship. But the most curious feature was located at the rear. The car was equipped with a rear window called the breezeway, which could be lowered completely by electric power, a rather impressive feature in 1957. However, when the window was lowered while the car was moving, aerodynamic forces created a reverse suction effect, pulling exhaust fumes from the tailpipe back into the cabin. This meant that many passengers ended up smelling gasoline fumes right inside the car. The Turnpike cruiser also featured a complex electrical system called seat-o-matic. When the driver turned off the engine, the seat would automatically slide backward to make it easier to step out of the car. The idea sounded convenient, but in reality, the complicated electrical system frequently malfunctioned and sometimes caused the seat to move at the wrong moment. Under the hood was a Lincoln Y-block V8 engine with a displacement of 368 cubic inches, producing about 290 horsepower and 405 pound-feet of torque. A powerful engine typical of American cars of that era. However, all those flashy features came with a price. The car became excessively heavy, consumed large amounts of fuel, and was plagued with electrical problems. Mercury produced only about 23,000 Turnpike cruisers, and the model quickly became one of Ford's most disappointing projects of that period. 1953 Hudson Jet. In the early 1950s, Hudson was once a formidable name in the American automobile industry. The Hudson Hornet dominated NASCAR racetracks and brought tremendous prestige to the company. But the company's leadership believed they needed a smaller, more affordable model to compete with increasingly powerful rivals. And this is where the story began to take a rather strange turn. The company's president at the time, A.E. Barrett, was well known for his habit of always wearing a fedora. He wanted a car where, when sitting inside the cabin, there would still be enough headroom so he wouldn't have to remove his hat. This seemingly small request ended up changing the entire design of the car. Engineers were forced to raise the roofline on what was originally a fairly short and narrow chassis platform. The result was a Hudson Jet that looked tall and awkward, with a thin body and unbalanced proportions, completely opposite to the low, long, and sleek sedans that were dominating the American market at the time. Instead of looking modern and sleek, the car ended up resembling a matchbox standing upright on four wheels. Under the hood, the Hudson Jet used an L-head inline-six engine with a displacement of 202 cubic inches, producing about 104 horsepower and 158 pound-feet of torque. It was a powertrain that was adequate, but nothing special enough to make up for the car's controversial design. Hudson invested about $16 million to develop this model, an enormous sum in the early 1950s. But the market was hardly convinced. Only about 35,000 Hudson Jets were produced before the project quickly came to an end. The financial losses from this model severely weakened Hudson, and not long afterward the company was forced to merge with Nash in order to survive. 1957 King Midget Model 3. While Detroit was fascinated with cars longer than 18 feet, weighing nearly 2 tons, and carrying massive V8 engines under the hood, the King Midget chose a completely opposite path. This car was designed to be extremely simple, even to the point that it could be purchased as a mail-order kit and assembled at home. In terms of size, the Model 3 was so small that many people seeing it for the first time assumed it was a golf cart rather than a real automobile. The chassis was basic, the body was lightweight, and there were almost no meaningful safety features at all. That made driving this car onto a major road a rather frightening experience. When massive Buicks, Cadillacs, or Oldsmobiles rushed past at high speed, the King Midget looked more like a toy car trying to merge into real traffic. Its power was just as modest as its size. The Model 3 used a single-cylinder Wisconsin AENL engine with a displacement of 23 cubic inches, producing about 9 horsepower and 14.5 pound-feet of torque. That was enough for the car to roll along small town streets or rural roads, but clearly not meant to conquer the ever-expanding American highways. Even so, the King Midget had one major advantage: an extremely low price. Thanks to its low cost and simple design, about 5,000 Model 3 cars were produced. Most of them served people who simply needed a short-distance vehicle for getting around town or along quiet country roads. 1954. Nash Metropolitan. Interestingly, although it was sold under the brand of an American automaker, the Metropolitan was actually designed and built in England. Nash wanted to create a compact, fuel-efficient car for customers living in cities, a rather unusual idea at a time when Americans were fascinated with large and powerful sedans. But the problem lay in how the car was designed. Instead of fully embracing the small car style of Europe, Nash tried to squeeze distinctly American design elements into a tiny body. The Metropolitan still had a long hood, decorative air scoops, and even a rear-mounted spare tire, just like the large sedans of Detroit. The result was a car that looked like a miniature version of an American automobile, almost more like a cartoon caricature than a balanced design. The rounded body with partially enclosed wheels reminded many people of the earlier Nash bathtub cars, only this time everything had been scaled down. Under the hood was an Austin B-Series inline-4 engine with a displacement of 73 cubic inches, producing about 42 horsepower and 62 pound-feet of torque. Not powerful, but enough for this small and lightweight car to move easily around the city. Surprisingly, despite its somewhat unusual appearance, the Nash Metropolitan managed to find its own place in the market. Over its production lifetime, about 95,000 Metropolitans were sold. Over time, this tiny car even became a pop culture icon of the 1950s. 1959, Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner. The idea behind this car sounded incredibly appealing. A hardtop coupe that could automatically fold its entire metal roof into the trunk with the press of a single button. In the late 1950s, that felt more like a technological spectacle than a normal feature on a car. To make it possible, Ford created an extremely complex mechanical and electrical system. The Skyliner's retractable roof mechanism used 6 electric motors, 10 electromagnetic relays, numerous limit switches, and more than 610 feet of wiring running throughout the body to control every step of the folding process. When everything worked perfectly, the system looked truly impressive. The trunk lid opened, metal panels rotated in carefully timed stages, and the entire roof disappeared neatly into the rear. But if even a small relay or a single limit switch failed, the entire process could stop halfway. Owners sometimes found themselves in an awkward situation where the heavy metal roof was left hanging in mid-air with no way to close it manually. This design also made the trunk enormous, but left almost no space for luggage, since most of the area was taken up by the roof folding mechanism. Under the hood, the Skyliner was equipped with a Thunderbird special V8 engine, with a displacement of 352 cubic inches, producing about 300 horsepower and 395 pound-feet of torque, powerful enough to move the entire heavy mechanical structure of the car. Over its full production run, Ford built about 48,000 Skyliners, with around 12,000 units produced in 1959 alone. Although it was an impressive engineering achievement, the complex repair costs and overly complicated system led Ford to quickly abandon the idea of the retractable hardtop. 1958 Lincoln Continental Mark III. At that time, American luxury car manufacturers were engaged in a strange race. Whichever car was bigger, longer, and more imposing was considered more luxurious. Lincoln decided not only to join that race, but to push it to the extreme. The result was the Continental Mark III, which arrived like a massive ship made of steel. It was one of the longest and widest unibody cars ever produced in the United States. The body was enormous, with an extremely heavy front end featuring a gigantic bumper and a grille as wide as a wall of chrome. Along both sides of the car were numerous sharp metal creases, creating a design so complex that many people felt it looked more like a folded block of steel than a refined luxury sedan. At the rear, Lincoln even added a reverse slant rear window, a strange design detail that made the back of the car appear heavy and aesthetically confusing. And when sitting behind the wheel, the enormous size of the car became even more obvious. Driving the Continental Mark III through narrow streets felt almost like steering an armored barge on asphalt. Under the hood was a MAL V8 engine with a displacement of 430 cubic inches, producing about 375 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, a powerful engine typical of American luxury cars of that era. But that power also came with a major drawback: enormous fuel consumption. Only about 12,000 Continental Mark III cars were sold. While Lincoln tried to impress buyers with sheer size and extravagance, rival Cadillac focused instead on more elegant and balanced designs. 1951 Crosley Farm-O-Road. At first glance, Crosley's idea sounded quite reasonable. They wanted to create a compact vehicle that could drive on paved roads so farmers could travel into town, go to church on Sundays, but also take it out into the fields to work during the week. Because of that, the Farm-O-Road was designed to resemble a miniature version of a Jeep. The body was extremely simple, the chassis was lightweight, the ground clearance was high, and it could even attach small agricultural implements at the rear. But that very simplicity soon became the problem. When driven on highways, this light and narrow vehicle shook noticeably, especially when strong winds hit or when large trucks passed by. The driving experience felt unstable, quickly making many people realize that it was not truly suitable for long-distance road travel. But when taken out into the fields, the Farm-O-Road revealed another weakness. It simply was not powerful enough to perform the work of a real tractor. Under the hood was a Cybier inline-4 engine with a displacement of 44 cubic inches, producing about 26.5 horsepower and 33 pound-feet of torque, enough to move the vehicle, but far too modest for the two roles it was expected to perform. As a result, the Farm-O-Road ended up in a rather ironic situation. It was not comfortable enough to be a true road car, and it was not powerful enough to become a reliable piece of farm equipment. Only about 600 units were produced before the project quietly disappeared from the market. Looking back at this list, it's easy to smile at some of the strange ideas that came out of Detroit in the 1950s. A car with gear shift buttons placed right in the center of the steering wheel, another that came with a pink umbrella and a matching handbag, or massive machines packed with complex technology far beyond what the era could truly handle. But if we look a little closer, these cars were not simply mistakes. They were the traces of a time when engineers and designers dared to experiment with almost every idea they could imagine. And those bold experiments, even when they failed, helped reshape the practicality of the American automobile industry in the decades that followed. Now, I'm very curious to hear from you. Have you ever seen any of these cars in person? Or did someone in your family ever own or repair one of them? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoy automotive history stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.